So the mapping of the water crisis is, it connects the water shutoff to urban planning and also austerity. So it's a really great example also of community-led research. And we'll go ahead and get started in just 1 minute. So if folks want to grab food if you haven't, or grab some water if you haven't. I'm trying to turn it up a little bit. Let me know how this sounds. Does that sound a little bit better?
Does that sound good?
Can folks hear it okay in the back?
Yes. A little bit more? A little more. A little more.
Can you hear me now? Does it sound good?
Rio, what do you think?
Hello? Okay, that sounds good. So, sound okay? Sounding good in the back? All right. So if folks can, if you could move forward, we'd like to make this as intimate as possible. Just a reminder, this is a community classroom, so we do really want everyone to engage as much as possible. The format of this speaker series for the fall of 2017 is that we start with a panel. And we are looking at the concept of the commons within culture and also commons as it relates to people and place, and what it means both in crisis and what it means as far as what we're trying to build and what commons can look like in the community. So the first part is the panel, the conversation, and tonight we're looking at, we're going to start with a welcome to the land and be set firmly in place in which we are. And we have folks that are here to speak to the commons as a housing crisis, the commons as a water crisis, and so how we're looking at housing and water for tonight. So I would like to start by introducing Mama Sharon George. Sharon George is an Anishinaabe and joins us today all the way from London, Ontario. But her roots are firmly in Detroit. She wove Indigenous knowledge throughout the Detroit 2010 Social Forum and brought Anishinaabe way through the Great Lakes, along with other nations, to lead the marches and assemblies. She had a leadership role at the Detroit American Indian Health and Family Services for many years and bring earth and women together in relationship, often through ceremony.
Good evening. It's a real honor for me to be here this evening. As she said, my name is Sharon George, but my spirit name is Wadati. And Wadati means one who speaks. And I come from the Oneida Nation, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, where I was adopted into the nation. And I am Turtle Clan, and I don't speak my language. That was something that was taken away from my family. And so, you know, I know bits and pieces of language. I understand a little bit to hear it. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what I do and that sort of thing. I have a spiritual background, and so I'm known as a woman pipe carrier. And what that means is one who helps heal the spirit of women. And so when I was given this pipe, the elder talked about at that time that there was a lot of friction, there was a lot of turmoil with our women. And he talked about that was really important to understand what our roles were of women and how come it was so important for us to be able to become settled again. to be able to walk in balance and to be able to understand our spirituality, and not only our spirituality, but how to maintain the roles of women. And he said why that was so important is because women are the life givers. Women carry that life and carry that water within them. And so that's so important because two of those roles have a significant symbolism to life in general. One is that in order to carry that life, you have to be able to carry that water. And so we all know that our babies are sustained within that water. And so they talk about how important it is for the women to be able to understand that, and to be able to understand if we didn't have that water, how we wouldn't be able to have that life. And so that was something very much an idea that he wanted to make sure that that I understood, and so that I could carry on that message to our women. And not only our women, but all women, because all women are those life givers. And so what we say is that we are so important to the role that we have as women. And so when he talked about that women were not getting along, we can look back and talk about how feuding began to happen with women. And you can look at maybe in your own families or in your communities, and you see that there's a lot of tensions when we look at just the women's roles. And so he was talking about how there needed to become the peace of the women, because once the women could understand that peace and that balance, and understand their spiritual roles and their spiritual connections to the earth and to water, that we would be able to have a better leadership. And so we see with the country today, you know, it's really off kilter. And so a lot of that stems from that ourselves, that this earth right now is so off balance because we have a lot of turmoil that's going on. And so what he talks about, when he talked to me about that, he said, well, the women have the responsibility, not only as that life giver, but as that first teacher. So once that life comes out, that those first words that are spoken are generally spoken by that woman to that baby. And as that baby grows and as that baby is nurtured, generally it's that woman that's providing that first nurturing to that child. And it doesn't mean that the men don't have responsibility to that, because the men have as much responsibility to that, especially in our ways, that they have responsibility to our males. But they talk about how important each of those roles are and how each of those roles have their balance. That each of those roles have certain responsibilities to each other, to family, to the elders, to the little ones, to the aunties and to the uncles. And so, as you see, it's not just one-sided. So my people, the Oneida people and the Haudenosaunee people, we are matriarchal people. And so that means that we as the women have the first lead as far as that leadership goes. And so if you was brought up in the school systems that I was brought up in, they didn't talk too much about the Native people, the American Indian people. We don't call them American Indians anymore. We call them, you know, by our First Nations. So when Diana was introducing, she said Anishinaabe people. So the Anishinaabe people were one of the people of the land, of this land, of the Detroit area. So this Detroit area was founded by the people that lived here, which was the Huron people, the Potawatomi people, and the Odawa and the Ojibwe people. And so those were the primary First Nations that lived in this community. And so most of the communities that you know of that has a land base, well, they lived in the land base, or in the water base, excuse me. And so, as you know, Detroit is founded right on the waters. And so all of that area down by the waters, that was their first surroundings in the summertime, spring and fall. And then in the winter, they moved back. Their communities, their homes were very portable. It wasn't like, you build a house today and it sits there. It's not like we're talking about those little houses, those tiny houses that they can just put up on a trailer now. But back in the day, it was portable houses, easy to put up, easy to take down, and easy to move. So in this area, that was the primary people that founded on this particular land. And so every community that you went to, there was another Native peoples that lived in that area. So I grew up here in Detroit, just a few blocks down the road where my family first moved to when we came to Detroit. I was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario, on the Six Nations Reserve. And so my father was Mohawk, and my mom's reserve was a little reserve just about an hour and a half across the border, which is called Raventown. And it's just past Chatham there, and it's just a small community, and we used to say as we were little kids that we could walk from one end to the other end because it's just like a Four Corners reserve. And so then when we were brought up over here in Detroit, this area down here in the Cass Corridor was the Native community. It's where most Native people, when they came into town, and we knew Detroit back even when I was young and before, that it was the industrial place. It was the industrial place for people to come and find jobs. And so most Native people, when they did come here from other cities or other countries, area in Canada, that they would primarily settle downtown first, because that's where they knew that there was a Native community set up down here. And so it was funny because me and my husband was also raised up here in Detroit, and he lived I'm doing something wrong. He lived a couple blocks away from me, and we didn't know each other at that time. And it wasn't until 18 years later that we decided to, finally hook up. And so I've been with my husband for 40 years now. And we have 3 grown children, and we have 8 grandchildren. And our grandchildren, the first 5 of them live in Wisconsin up near the Minnesota border. And the other 3 live in Walpole Island, which is also across the waters from Algonac. And so it was funny when my girls were growing up, because being raised up here in Detroit, they love to shop. So they would be at all of the malls and all of that sort of thing, and so they enjoyed that part. But they got married, and they moved off to reservations, and it was so funny because they had never lived off a reservation before, and it's like country, there ain't much around you. It's not like you have a shopping mall, within a driving radius. It's nothing like that, and so it was very different for my girls to be raised up or moved to the reservations where their husbands were from. And so now my grandchildren, they are being raised up on the reservation, and they all now speak their language, which is really a very important part of what our people believe in. Because they talk about that you need to know where you're from. And so when we talk about where we're from, and when we ask anybody where we're from or where they're from, it's usually what community are you from? Where'd you grow up? Where's your home? And so we introduce ourselves and we say we're from, you know, whatever First Nations that we're from. And then the second thing that they talk about is that you need to know where you're going, because, okay, so if you want to know where you have been, you know, through this history of your peoples, you need to know that, you need to understand that, you need to understand why you are the way you are today. And then so as you're going forward, you need to understand where you're going, because that's an important next step. And so we talk about that it's important for us to understand that 7 generations. And so when we talk about those 7 generations, we're not just talking about what happens today or next year or when my grandbabies grow up. So right now we have 4 generations. So we have my husband's parents, and we have me and my husband who are the 2nd generation, and our children who are the 3rd generation, and our grandchildren who are the 4th generation. So now we need to think of 3 generations ahead, because we always need to be focused on the next 7 generations, all of those ones yet unborn. And if we can think about it in that terms, all of those ones yet unborn, 7 generations from now. So when we're talking about all of the issues in our community, all of the issues that we have in Detroit here, when we talk about all of the problems that happen, when we talk about the waters and how unhealthy they are, when we can talk about the pollution and how unhealthy it is to be breathing some of this stuff, we can talk about those things, but it's time to take action about those things. And so that's what we talk about, those 7 generations in the future, because it's really important to be talking about my grandbabies. It's really important to talk about my great-grandbabies, and then so on and so on and so on, because we don't want to be raised up, you know, in those sci-fi movies, and we see the destruction, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, the buildings all blowing up, and there's this great fire and that sort of thing. Well, our prophecies talk about that sort of stuff also. The things that, maybe if I move my arm. It talks about those things that are going to happen. And so a long time ago, our people talked about the destructions that were going to start to happen. And unless we begin to do something about it, that we're going to see more destructions. And so probably in every one of our lifetimes, we have seen quite a bit of destructions. And so we're seeing a lot more natural disasters, environmental disasters. We're seeing a lot more of the hurricanes that are happening. We're seeing earthquakes that are happening. So those are those natural disasters. And then we're seeing the violence. So they talked about the violence and the turmoil that people will have. That people, you know, while we say, hey, we're all the same, we put on our pants the same, we put on our, you know, clothes the same, we bleed the same, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Well, we can talk about that, but we need to understand each other. And that's something that we know that doesn't happen all over the place. We still have lots of prejudice, we still have systemic prejudice. We still have such barriers to many of the things that happened a long time ago. And so for our people, we talk about systemic racism. We talk about that generational trauma that multi-generational trauma that has happened, that hasn't gone away, that's still there, and again, it's why we are the way we are. So if we ever think about what happened with our parents, what happened with our grandparents, and so on, you know, there are little things that we can tap into, that we can look at what happened to our parents. We can tap into what happened to our grandparents. We can talk about where they came from, what happens to them. So anyway, in the third thing that we talk about, so we talk about, you know, where we have been, we've talked about where we're going, and we talk about that it's important to understand your language. Because they say that it's important to understand your language because in our way, that we were all given a language. Every one of us were given a language. Way back when, it might not have come from our generation, might not have come from the last generation, maybe the generation before. Maybe it's our grandparents or our great-grandparents. That's whatever language that you people had, and I people had. So it's about understanding that language. And there's a reason why today we don't speak that language. Because, you know, the government has systemized all of us. And so it's about how do we get out of that box now? How do we start creating things like this so we can start doing the work now that we need to do so that we can understand that history. We can understand where we're going and that we still have a connection to our own. So I just wanted to share that little bit with you tonight, and I'll be here to talk to some of you, to talk about, you know, where you came from. What are some of those systemic barriers that you have? What are some of those women issues that you have? What are some of those water issues that we have, and some of those issues that we have in our own communities? So I thank you for spending your time and allowing me to share my little bit with you. Ellie.
We quit Sharon for sharing your wisdom and sharing your truth and sharing your story. It's always an honor to be able to be in your presence and hear your work. And so for our panel tonight, the moderator is William Copeland. William Copeland is one of the co-directors of East Michigan Environmental Action Council. And he's also a very talented hip-hop artist. And tonight we are actually celebrating 8 years of marriage together, so. Happy anniversary. There's no one that I would rather share this time with, that work with. And it's wonderful to share this all with all of you as well. And so with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Will.
Peace, how's everybody doing? Good, good. I've been asked, Craig Register asked for me to do a quick performance piece so that you can feel a little bit of the energy of the panel. Is that all right with y'all? All right. Well, on the theme of, I'm very happy, very blessed that we have these panelists that are here for you. And I hope that this piece right here just shares a little bit of my interpretation of the energy that we're going to talk about as far as reclaiming the commons. It's a song, it's very easy to sing along. It just goes, take the houses back, take the houses back. I'm pretty sure you'll get it.
Moral imperative that relates to whether or not people have a right to live inside the house.
Take the houses back. Take the houses back. Take the houses back. They belong to the people. Take the houses back. Take the house back, baby. Take the house back, baby. We don't gotta go get nobody's mousetrap. We got what we need in our community. Grab the keys in your hand, unlock that. Get a crowbar and just rock that. Just meet at the bank and just crowd that. Show at least that we know where the power's at. Take vacant houses, turn them them into homes. Let your mental roam like a signal phone. It's true indeed, there's a human need. People on the street, but the crib's empty. This ain't no baby, babe, it ain't no ass to shake. Just to open the bill, get the class away. We mad as hell, it's cold as hell. We some northern soldiers, they made us yell. To my southern cousins, let's take it there. On the coast, provoke and protect your peeps. Occupy our homes, let's play for keeps. Let's roll the dice, this game is deep. Take abandoned lots, make them guided plots. Then guide the plots, cause the block is hot. Unbar the locks, then watch for cops. When we get together, we're hard to stop. Cost of living is going up. Cost of living is going up. Cost of living is going up.
The needs of the many must always outweigh the needs of the few.
We got the mamas, papas, attorneys, rockers, kids in the fosters, vets and doctors, black flag activists, grips and nomads, grannies, big old families. Oh man, take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Everybody need a place to kick back. When you get yours, then it's time to give back. Say we can't wait, man, get your rebatement. Everybody need to come grab a plate. My granny, my uncle, and my aunt used to share a crib. Where you live, there's no imperative. There you is, she got a house when she wrote that check. He got a house with the port and shit. My man got his spot with a vote protest. My man got his spot for a bucket of leaf. With a baseball coach and game ain't over. I came to the office and marched like soldiers. What's wrong, baby girl? Bring it all back. Your gym shoes, your bike, bring it all back. No trouble, baby girl, get your ball back. Get your time and come on, grab all that. What? Gotta go flat. That's what we need. Grab the keys in your hand, unlock that. Get crowbar in. Just me and the man. Show these that we know where the power's at right here.
Chances of living going down, cost of living going up. Chances of living going down, cost
Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, y'all. Welcome everybody to Crisis in Context. I'm so happy to be William Copeland and to introduce our two panelists who are going to tell you more about this crisis and about this context. Mama Sharon, her comments really laid out a lot for this entire speaker series, and a lot is really asking the question of what type of culture do we want to live in? And she talked a lot about her culture, the importance of language, multi-generation, matriarchal, the fact that it teaches responsibilities, its relationship to the land. But I think that these panelists today are really going to ask us the question of what kind of culture do we want to live in, but even more importantly, what kind of culture do we live in right now? Let's open our eyes and see what type of culture it is that we are actually living now so that we can see what we want to do about it. The two topics that we're really going to address today are housing and water. And many people think of them as personal problems. You have a big house, you have a small house, you pay rent, you have a mortgage, that's your personal problem, your personal situation. But our speakers today are going to transform our understanding of these two issues from going beyond just personal problems to what is this collective understanding, what is this cultural understanding that we need to have as far as housing and as far as water. And they're going to share with you some of today's crises, and they're going to share with you today some of the context, and they're going to share with you today some of the solutions that they are working on. Do y'all have a preference for this person? I'm going to first, I'll introduce both of them, but first will be Jerry Colors. He's a father to a 25-year-old graduate of Wayne State and a husband of 35 years. Jerry met with Mel Watt, former director of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in Washington, D.C., and testified before state reps in Lansing about the housing problems in Detroit. He's been a guest on various radio programs and university classrooms to speak on the housing crisis and is a member of Detroit Eviction Defense since 2012. He has gone through foreclosures and evictions and won. And also, after him will be Marion Kramer. She has been at the forefront of the struggle of the poor and a leader in the fight to stop the privatization of water in Detroit, Michigan. She has been the front lines of the welfare rights and civil rights movements from its origins in the 1960s. Kramer serves as the co-chair of the National Welfare Rights Union. And after this panel discussion, after they talk for a little bit, we'll break for a little bit and have time where you'll get to talk in small groups with one of our three esteemed presenters, and you can go into even more detail than their presentation. So with no further ado, Jerry Colors.
Thank you. 1 second. At the age of right now, the way I can write things down, memory is not as good as it used to be. So just give me a second here. You know, that's what I want to start you off with is first a couple of authors of books that I find that are very interesting. One is Matthew Desmond, who's the author of Evicted. Matthew is he's an academic. He's a teacher at Harvard. He's also a socialist. They highlighted that in there. And what he's done is he's wrote books about people who are paying 70 to 80% of their income for their homes. Now you can imagine that. You get paid and your check is gone just to stay in the house or rent. But like I said, we know the majority of the homes that they are paying this exorbitant amount of money for, virtually inhabitable. They're infested. And this is where it comes down to where you have people who are being evicted from their homes. The homes are turning into rental properties. This is another fight that we're going into. Like I said, like you said before, I am a member of Detroit Eviction Defense. Everybody hear me out there?
Hold it up a little closer.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I am a member of Detroit Eviction Defense. So what we started out with this program was the eviction and foreclosures. But now we're moving into the renters because what has happened is that a lot of people who are losing their homes are turning into renters. We have gone from a percentage of where Detroit used to have the #1 homeowners, black homeowners in this country, which we have gone from 1970, where you have, compared to the white population of 66% in 1970, and black percent of 51%. And in 2014, we went to where you have 53.2% white home ownership, and down to 45 black home ownership in 2014. And also we have decrease the black ownership. Now what you have is 53% renters. So we have gone from owning homes to where we're renting them now. So you went from #1 down to the bottom of the list right there. But again, the author of The Evicted is Matthew Desmond. The second author is James DeFlippis. That's DELFILIPIS. He is the author of Unmasking Goliath. And this is about community control in the faces of global capital. And what the book is about is three main things. What he has in there, the three major themes: collective, ownership, work, housing, and money. Those are three things that his book is about. And you find out all this does apply to your everyday life. You know, you're going from owning property to back to renting property. You're going from having a home to stay and no place to stay. Now, for all you out there who realize, you know, that still own your home or did that at one time, you ask yourself, how did all this start? Majority of this started back in 2006 to where the federal government bailed out the banks. When they bailed out the banks, they did not bother to tell the banks exactly what to do with this $15.7 billion that they gave them. They felt like the banks would be honest enough to where they would do what's right. Okay, we learned a lesson there. You know, the banks are not going to do what's right. So what happened? My wife tells me to read, you know, but I'm not a very good reader out loud. I got a pocket full of excuses. Let me see if we can get this right here. It said to sell the mortgage-backed securities, Fannie and Freddie promised to reimburse investors to the full value of any mortgage in the MSB, the MBS, I'm sorry. MBS is the mortgage-backed securities. They went into full default in the speculative fever of the housing boom in 2008. Fannie and Freddie assumed this would never be a problem. So they even started buying subprime mortgages from predatory lenders. There you go, right there. Subprime, predatory. What does that sound like to you? Sound like something wrong already. So what happened is that when they did all this, millions of homeowners went into default in 2008. Fannie and Freddie could not cover guarantees to panic investors, and the federal government took over both companies. They are now managed by the Federal Housing Financial Agency. So we lost out on that. The money's gone. So what we end up with is the fact where you homeowners are stuck with mortgages that they can't pay. They were first put in the mortgages that they could not pay. When you apply for a home or you wanted to refinance your home and you went and applied for that, what happened was that whether you could afford it or the mortgage or not, if you were making $10,000 a year, they said it was okay, you can buy a home for $50,000. That's what happened. People got trapped in those mortgages. Everything hit the bottom, and the next thing you know, everybody that bought those homes that couldn't afford them have lost them. And now we're sitting at a problem where today home ownership is threatened. One of the main things that we apply for as citizens of this country, one of the main things that we look for, one of the main ideas that we work for is the fact that where someday I'm gonna own my own home. And a lot of us can sit back and picture the house we want. We can see it, 3 bedrooms, beautiful. Big backyard for the dog and my kids. A beautiful neighborhood. This is what you work for. This is what we strive for. This is what we believe in as Americans, that we can achieve this. But it has come down to the point now to where big banks, which the terminology they should take away from them, too big to fail. Nothing should be too big to fail. Everything is optional. Anything is fair game at that. Well, what happens is that now the big banks, they got all this money, and $15.7 billion is a lot of money. They could have solved the problems. They could have fixed this. Nobody should have ever lost their homes, but they have. And one thing that people don't understand or don't know is that when you own your home, how many of you think the bank that you went to is the bank that you owe the money to? You don't. That bank that you went to now is called a server. You pay him. He in turn sends it to Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae in turn sends it to Mortgage Bank Securities. The Mortgage Bank Securities in turn sends your mortgage to Wall Street. Your money's on Wall Street. Your mortgage is owned by Wall Street. The only thing that somebody gets back from is the bank. They get a service fee. So everything that you pay on your house late fees, interest, and everything goes to Wall Street. When I found this out, I was like, my God, you know. So Wall Street owns your house. They're free to do with it whatever they want to. So when you think that your money is safe, no. If Wall Street fails, you're gonna lose your house. That's simple as that, because they got your money. They control the money. They control the mortgage on your house. And a lot of people didn't know that. I didn't know until I found out about it. Being in this organization that I'm in, to make the story like this, my wife and I applied for a modification on our home. Grant, we've been there for 24 years. And because of what happened to the city government here, the value on our home went down, but the price stayed up. So as normally the banks are offering a refinance so they can equalize it. So we applied for it. We applied 2006 with Co-America, who sold the loan to a subprime mortgage company, Countrywide. Countrywide was notorious in the mortgage industry and was bought out by Bank of America. The housing crisis hit in 2008 and affected millions of homeowners all across the country. Due to the recession in Detroit, Michigan, the effects then trickled down to where my employer used to work for Wonder Bread. As a result of my wages were cut twice. During the last round of concessions, my pension was going to be cut a third. I decided to retire at the age of 62 after 26 years in the company. Wonder Bread closed across the U.S. 1 month later. I retired October 20th, 2012. Within 3 weeks, the company was gone. So I was one of the fortunate ones to get out of there. A lot of guys had more time in that than I did, but they didn't have the age. But because of my age, I was able to get out with a pension. The rest of them are still fighting for their pensions in court today. Yeah. So that was a luck on my side. Bank of America gave us the runaround for 2 years. They ignored requests, repeatedly asking for some documents. We were essentially victims of dual tracking, where the bank stated they were working on the modification and working with us, only to have them return 2 months later, return 2 months of a mortgage of $2,700. They sent that back to us. Now, what I said about the paperwork, what happened is that when we sent the paperwork in, 2 weeks later, they would contact us and say, you're missing page such and such. So we had to do it all over again. We sent it back to them again. Oh, you're missing page such and such. We had to do it again. We did this 3 times. Finally, the 4th time when they sent it, I did copy everything over and sent it registered mail to where somebody at Bank of America had to sign for it. And reply to that, oh, the person that was working on your case is no longer works here. There you go. Just had to start all over again with that. We are still in our home, thanks to our neighbors and Detroit Eviction Defense Organization. This group and neighbors banded together to help us win our state and fight unjust eviction. We picketed Bank of America and Fannie Mae, and they soon agreed to modify our mortgage. At the same time, Bank of America and Fannie Mae were going to sell the home to an investor for $30,000. They were going to sell our home for $30,000. Instead, Bank of America agreed to modify and reduce our monthly mortgage payments by $500. The return $2,700 payment to us has cost us $40,000 in late fees. So what they did, they took that and they tacked it onto the new mortgage and put it on the rear end of the new mortgage. So it wasn't our fault. We didn't ask for it, they sent it back to us. So they put it to where it cost us $40,000 in late fees, penalties, extending the mortgage to 40 years. We now owe $131,000 in a house worth $25,000 to $30,000. We're still fighting that. And we have no equity. I will be 102 years old before my house is paid off. I'm gonna live that long just to spite it. Bank of America. Bank of America has raised the monthly payments 3 times for a shortage of escrow account. All my reduced pension goes to this raising mortgage costs. Countrywide, Bank of America, and other mortgage companies have ruined the housing market with predatory lending practices and foreclosures. The whole thing comes down to where we were honest. We played the game. I worked all my life. I worked since I was 12 years old. Had a good job, worked for Stroh, beautiful. That's the only job in my life I couldn't wait to go to. I love that place. My wife, she works, she's a professional. And so we did the right thing. We worked the American way. And then came about the fact that as soon as we asked for something that was legal, it's when they stuck it to us. The only way the Bank of America backed off from us was the fact the Detroit Eviction Defense, when we got together with them, they went to court with us, they wrote letters, they called, they emailed, they texted, they did everything. Finally, the manager out in California, who's in charge of the emails and things like that for the bank, called us and told us, you know, you guys have one organization, one hell of an organization there. There's been so much negative stuff on the internet about Bank of America that we can't fight you no more. We're gonna give you your mortgage. We're gonna give you your modification. Yeah. Thank you. This all goes to show that no matter how you feel, no matter what you may think, remember this one thing. This is not your fault. You didn't start this. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to rip off everybody in the country. So therefore, none of this that happens with the housing market, with the water, none of this is your fault. So my biggest complaint is that what we do wrong is we sit back and say nothing. We sit back and say nothing. Just like I was telling a young man earlier today, biggest problem in the black community is the older blacks. You know why? Because they're stuck in their ways of having nobody in their business. That thing right there can cost you. And I've seen a lot of counsel where it does. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. Don't blame yourself because you have done nothing wrong. We have clients come to us, but they come to us in the last minute, all because they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed because they're losing their house. Don't be embarrassed. Remember this one thing, it is not your fault. You did not do this. You are not in a position to take your own house away from you. People ask me, or people have said when I was going through this, well, why didn't you pay your mortgage? Are you kidding me? I have been paying my mortgage. One thing Bank of America said, oh, we see that you're not behind. I said, yes. Well, in order for you to get this modification, you gotta be 2 months behind. Excuse me. I said, so what are you telling me? Well, you need to be 2 months behind in your mortgage before we give you the modification. I said, are you telling me that you want me not to pay you? Well, if you want the modification, then yes. So, of course, I did what they said. Next thing I know, within 2 or 3 months, I got a foreclosure notice in my mailbox. That's when the fight started. Because Bank of America denied. And if you kept up with the news at the time all this was going on 2 years ago, you would have noticed that Bank of America hired 3,000 people. Remember that? When they came on news, we hired 3,000 people. So we're increasing the job market. They hired those 3,000 people to come in, take your paperwork, take a page out of it, throw it away, call you back and tell you you're missing it. Honestly, that was their job. After all the fiasco was over, Bank of America finally admitted that's what it is. But see, at the same time, when Bank of America came out with that, they said, well, we have to let 3,000 people go because of what happened. Those are the same 3,000 people they hired to do this. So they can play games with you. They can pretend that you're ignorant, stupid, you don't know. You can't comprehend what's going on in the market. The biggest thing I understand, and the biggest thing that I really believe in this country is that America will tell you what they are going to do. And they will write it down, they'll put it in a book and everything else. So they can't deny it. Well, I take that back. They will deny it even though they wrote it down. So they will tell you. So it's there. Just like Bank of America told me, oh, you got it. Don't worry about it. Skip 2 months, we'll pay you. We'll get you a mortgage. In the same sense, they didn't bother telling me that we're going to put you out when you do that. So what I feel and how I look at it is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. There's an old African, what do you call it? I forget it. But anyway, if you think that you're too small, just think about being in an enclosed room at night with a mosquito. Y'all get that? So that shows you, you're never too small to cause a problem. So don't ever think that you're too small to do something about the situation that you're in. You don't have to be big as this building to stop anything. One person could stop anything they want to. David and Goliath. Who was that? One person. So the way I feel, the way I look at things, and the reason why I'm still with the group that saved my home. Oh, before I forget, let me put this in there. On the day that I was supposed to be evicted was Halloween 2012. The dumpster was outside my house already. So the bailiff comes over to move us out. So one of the members of the group, his name is Steve Babson. He's a professor over at Wayne State. He didn't want nobody to know that though. But he and I were standing outside the house. This was the day after everybody went out there, rigged their leaves up, got bags all through the community. I live in Rosedale Park. So throughout the whole community, there's bags, leaves. He decided, said, well, we need to fill this dumpster up. So what we did, we got in our car, drove all around the community. Picked up every bag of leaves from Outer Drive and Grand River down to Southfield, down to Schoolcraft, all picked them and filled that dumpster up. The bailiff came over, you can bet believe she was hot. She was hot. She called for 2 more dumpsters. Say, okay, so what they did, while they're waiting for the dumpsters to come, the lady come to me, okay, Jerry, I'm looking, please, my name is Mr. Colors to you. Show me what you don't want. I don't know about y'all, but I've been in my house for over 23, 24 years. I think I accumulated a lot of stuff. From the attic, to the top floor, to the living room, to the basement, to the garage. Show me what you don't want in your house. Are you kidding me? I want everything that's in here. And like I told you, the hardest part was that I had to take the front window out to move my furniture in. So how y'all gonna move it out? That's the problem that was coming. They didn't care. The bailiff and the group that they use do not care. They will squeeze, they will tear your stuff up to get it out. Because that's what they're there for, just move you out. But the whole thing, while I'm reading the story, was that the fact that the unity of a community stood with me. When the police came out, we had 5 police cars come over my house. 5 police cars showed up my house to evict my wife, my daughter, my wife's mother, and my dog. To put us out. I mean, they were coming. You could hear them coming down from Grand River with the sirens blaring and everything. They get to the house. We had about 60 people from Detroit Eviction Defense, my neighbors and everything, blockaded the entire front part of the house and the back side of the house and told us they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. In the meantime, the lawyer that we had that was with the group had went downtown to the court, spoke to the judge, finally got the judge to write a stay. And the police lieutenant that was there over his radio turned around and told his officers, we can go now, they have a stay. We cannot move these people out. So that trip around the world always will tell you, don't be afraid. Stay. Stand up. Believe in what you want. If you don't believe in anything else, find a cause to believe in. Because we are here. I'll be here with you. I will stand with you. I'll go to court with you. I will fight with you for whatever cause you have. So find one. Become part of it. Start one. Lord, we know there's enough reason why you should have one. You know. So, but I thank you very much for letting me be here. And I greatly appreciate you listening.
Thank you so much.
I have to hold on to something that when you get 25, you have to hold on to something and kind of leave, you know. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I was so happy when I heard that Diane was one part of trying to get me to come here. I haven't been in the sanctuary in God knows when. We used to use this church a lot to organize the community around here. We met in these areas. So it's good to see that this church is still standing where we can have a place to do just what we're doing tonight, and that's educating and not only just educating, helping to develop the new leadership. That's you. Yeah, I've been in the fight for years. I think the first time I began to engage in the fight, I was about 5 years old in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And the area I was in Port Allen, which was a port at one time, and that's West Baton Rouge. When my family had to move eventually because of my grandfather, who fought back and told this little young man that was his boss, right across the street from our house on that Chapel Eye Street, 3 strikes and you out. This kid thought my grandfather was his property, but eventually my grandfather retaliated and showed him that he was not his property and took a stand. And the third time that this young man thought that he could get away with slapping my grandfather used to carry this little knife, which was nothing but a little bitty knife they would peel things with, right? And he cut him. He said, I told you 3 strikes and you're out. Well, quite naturally, the family on both sides had to move, came up to the house where we were living, and began, when I say on both sides, you know, my father's side, my mother's side, and began to plan on how they were going to get my grandfather out of Port Allen. Eventually, he ended up in Dallas, Texas, with his side of the family. And he was one of the babies of 15 children. And he was one of the twins. The other twin had passed away. But you know, it's something about that, and that stuck with me as a child. I didn't realize everything that was going on, but I knew my grandfather wasn't with us anymore. So eventually, a year and a half later, my mother and her 4 kids, I had 3 brothers and myself. And my mother and father had separated, and they, along with my grandparents, late at night, people came from Dallas to get us, to move to Dallas. And from that time on, through my mother and the church that I was involved in at that time, we were involved in the movement. If it was fighting, if the church was fighting against illegal lynching, people going to the electric chair just for looking at a white woman walking down the street, you know, or looking straight in the face, or any little excuse, this church that we were a part of was engaged in fighting for that, justice for the people that had to go through that type of stuff. All through the time, my mother kept us involved.
finally, when I went off to college, and I'm telling you this because I have learned so much from so many people. When I finally went off to college, I went to Southern University in Scotlandville, which is a part of Baton Rouge. And at that time, my cousins and all the other students there, and then this was, by the time I got down there, it was in 1962, had been put off the campus for demonstrating that they wanted the same equality that the white schools had, colleges had, because they were given a low amount of money to run that school as compared to LSU. And LSU sat right on the corner where nothing, the whole community were black people, but you could not go, the only way you could go on their campus was that you had to be an employee. And so I told my mother, they preached to me. My mother said, "You going to Louisiana, I don't want you involved in no demonstrations." And I just let her talk. And I said, "Well, what about these demonstrations we have already been involved in? And you were the leader of ours." She said, "Well, take care of yourself." Well, when I got to Louisiana, ooh, all my cousins and all the rest of them, they were all involved. Quite naturally, I wanted to get involved. And my cousin's cafe that sit right on the edge of the city limits was open all night when she wanted to. And who was hanging out there? The students from Southern University plotting what their next move would be. Well, quite naturally, I was going to get involved some kind of way. And that was my first time getting involved without my parents. And through that period of time, you know, the Deacon for Self-Defense was organized around us in Jonesboro, Louisiana. We were in jail for 8 nights and 8 days with mosquitoes biting us. You say something about a mosquito, my God. I remember that mosquitoes. And, you know, it's something else being away from home and you're not around nobody in your family, but your family become the people that you're working with. The deacons had to get on the highway with us in the cars, and we had to train each. If anybody said that they were in the civil rights movement and never were trained, they lied. Because you had to be trained to know how to fall in a demonstration. You had to be trained and see what was going to happen when what was expected of you if you could send out to test some of those places that still were not serving black people. You had to be trained to know how to deal with tear gas and all that type of stuff. And that took like 2 weeks to do that, and train on some of the history of the area where you're about to go to. And furthermore, you were trained too that the leaders really of those areas was not you as a civil rights worker. It was the people in those communities that had to take in charge of what was going on. And you needed to respect those people. Not only did we learn a lot, but that we didn't realize those were the great tools of organizing. And you learned respect for those communities. Those people would lay their lives down, and once they got bit by the mosquito, to fight against the injustice that had been happening for a long period of time. But I tell you, the biggest thing to me was when I came up here to the so-called Promised Land, Detroit, Michigan. And people used to, I got up here and Conyers, it was the first time Conyers was running for election. And we were up here for about 2 weeks, and I was approached by some of the people here said, Mary, do you think you have some time that you could hang with Fannie Lou Hamer when she come? I said, you talking about Fannie Lou Hamer from Mississippi? They said, I said, oh yeah, I'd be glad to hang with her. Fannie Lou had a lot of life in her. We went to different churches. We talked about some of the ministers and the pimps in the pulpit. Fannie Lou could sing. Fannie Lou told me all about the reason she had a big family here. And she was up here not only to visit them, but to support Conyers at the time. But she was having problems with her eyes. Because when Fannie Lou was finally beaten down there in Mississippi, and they made 2 young men, black men, beat her, she told them, beat me, because if not, they're gonna kill you. And Fannie Lou was beginning to lose her eye because of the beating. And she was up here to go, to not only participate in the campaign, but she was on her way to New York eventually. And Harry Belafonte and his wife was paying for the operation. I said, that was a joy just hanging with her. Because not only could she sing and speak about what was happening in Mississippi and rouse up the audience and stuff like that, but Fannie Lou was a comedian also. Because she would have you laughing so hard you was crying. And watch out, you better not have to go to the bathroom because you might be wet by the time you finish up with her. But these are the people that I enjoyed and learned from. And during the period of time, and, you know, when I finally got up here to stay, they had asked us to stay up here, my first husband and I. We came back, and the first thing we had to do was get involved in the community. They were urban renewing that whole area out for Wayne State to expand. They were going to build University City 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The people that lived in the area used to have pictures of their cars that they had bought, pictures of their homes that they had bought, and sending that back home and say, see what we're being able to do up here. But they did not know what the city had planned really for their area. They had an area over there we were turning into in Research Park for nothing but for Wayne State to be able to use in a big lab and all that type of stuff. Where you see the gym over there, there was no gym and nothing on that lot, but there had been some people homes that they had fought and built. And over where I was living on Forest and Lincoln don't even exist no more. They had, the plans at Wayne State was that they were going to knock all the houses down where we were living and end up building trees. All of a sudden, Wayne State became an environmental group. Building trees, and I said, well, why all these trees right now? They said, well, this is for the students to be able to sit under and be able to enjoy themselves and relax. Well, what about the people that you're pushing out? Oh, we're going to help them because we're going to give them some money and help them to relocate. We had to start a fight to try to save that area. We ended up with Hobart Street being one of the last streets that was left at the time. And there was a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Smith at that time, that said, look, I got a few people and we want our homes, because they had taken them all to condemnation court. How many of you have heard of condemnation court? I know you know. Condemnation court, and you don't hear too much about that. Condemnation court is where they end up taking you when the city has made a bid for your house and told you that because they'd gone through the necessary committees of the city, and they end up saying how much your house should go for given the market. And these houses was going for $7,500. These people had worked their tails off to pay for those houses for their children. But they didn't understand that the zoning committee, people don't, they tell us they're teaching us civics in school, but they don't really teach you civics. Because you really, if you're out here and you're going against some urban renewal or something, like, you're going to learn all those committees. Zoning had given Wayne State their opportunity to take that area for whatever they wanted. And those people said, we're going to make a stand. And we said, if you're going to make a stand, we're going to make a stand for you. We had a lot of young ministers, particularly Catholic ministers and what have you. I said, if y'all stay with us, the diocese is probably going to fire all of y'all. And it won't be for the fact that you're out here struggling to have nuns and priests being able to marry each other. They're going to probably get rid of some of you anyway. They stayed. And the first time what we took, they had taken and took the stairs off the last houses that was left in a particular area. And they came in and started arresting us. We were facing 7 years in the federal penitentiary for trying to save people's homes that they had sweat, died, and everything else to try to make for their family. We eventually began to pack the courtrooms. And the people began to understand what this government was all about. Because you could see that the government then was not representing our interests. They were representing the interests of corporations. And if they could have beat us down enough, they were hoping that we would give up and give those last 4 houses away. We stood firm and won that area over and fought for housing. And that's where you see they have a lot of housing over there now. Although Miss Smith passed away, her husband passed away, but it was over the fact that they were determined to save that community. So I've stayed out here, and one of the biggest things we have been on, I've been in welfare rights since its beginning, because welfare rights ended up being built in the fight to represent the interests of low-income and public assistance recipients. Not only doing that, but also the fact that we stayed in the housing fight. Some of the best people I've seen that could take houses were women. And I've listened to you earlier, sis, and I know what you're saying. Not only take houses, they'll talk a hole in a police head as to everybody else be running around there taking some houses. But since we took houses, because the Defense Committee came out of some black fight, when we used to take houses, they began to go in the legislature because we were winning at the court level. Because I said we would pack the courtroom, they started talking about getting laws, making it a federal offense for you to take houses. It used to be a misdemeanor. Now they want to criminalize everything that we do. But if you understand what is happening now, and you see is it right in your face, that Napoleon, you know, the mayor of the city of Detroit, with his little arrogant and conceited behind, people say, well, he represents the Republican. We say, no, he represents the interests of the corporation. And he told you that after he had stole the election. And he was telling you that went before then. But you wanted to sleep through it. But if you understand and what I'm saying, understand the objective process, what is taking place out here. I live in Highland Park now. And people are saying, oh, they want to move the people in Highland Park because we blacks. I said, well, what are they going to do with the white folks that's left here? We don't know. I said, well, you better get to studying and finding out what's planned from here. They did not make that M1 for us. That's a plan for the workforce that they need now. Not for folks like myself, because they figure I can't do nothing no more. Well, who all have visited a factory as of lately and know how clean it is as compared to when my husband and them used to work there? It's like they wear white coats, some of them. And they don't need, and you talk to each other, sometimes you don't even know each other, but you be on that internet. I be trying to tell my kids, I say, you don't know that person. Well, that's my friend. How's that your friend? You ain't never met that person. You know, sometimes take that thing and put it down and talk to some people, and maybe they will become your friend in person. You know, so the internet, through the internet, not only just the internet, technology. My son works at Ford. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I lay out the instruments for the robot to pick up. I said, well, you know, at one time, they brought into the factory for the instrument, they brought in the robots to enhance the workers to produce. Now you enhancing the robots to produce. And they're going to get rid of you picking that little instrument up and laying it out sooner or later because they don't need you no more. All I'm saying is, in each step of the way, if you notice, there was conditions that I had to face in order to see how to organize in those areas. And we could not go in and say, well, you should be doing this. We went in and found out what was going on and how could we move to help with those communities. When it came down to housing, I didn't go to Diane and say, y'all need a house? Then why don't we go over here and take it? No. People were afraid to let you know that they might be living in a vacant house. But we were good, we were loud when we took over public housing. Because the water, when we knew, we take over public housing and get in there, the water was still running. Because if one apartment had heat, the whole building had heat. And so it was good at one time we did that. Now when I'm through after this, when we decided that in welfare rights that we was going to take over the water situation, fight. People were coming in our office over and over again, saying, my lights are about to be turned off. My this is bad. I said, oh, Maureen, I said, look here, let's go a little deeper, because I bet their water is off also. And this is at the end, this was at the end of the 90s. We had now not only found out that people's water was shut off, the electricity was off, their lights were off, but this country has beaten people down so much, they feel shameful to be, they are ashamed that they should let people know that this stuff is happening. Worst of all, a lot of people with their water are under the threat of their children being taken. Now the welfare department will tell you, you know, we don't do that. Oh, yes they do, because we have had to fight them many times to get people's water back. And we told folks too, the safety net is not needed no more the way they used to, because that's what they service the Reserve Army of Unemployed. And they don't need all those folks no more. People say, oh, y'all, you know, they didn't think we knew what we were talking. It was under the Carter administration, the Clinton administration, and you name it, Obama and all the rest of them. We had to watch that continuously, and we watched them get rid of certain programs. The last thing they're coming after is Social Security. And I say to you students, you got a job to do. And that job is that you know that you are the welfare recipients now, in essence. Because when you get out of school and they slap those fees and everything else on you, thought he was something going through his situation. Wait till you have to pay yours, pay that mess back. You're not going to be doing nothing but working for the government. Because education should be free from birth to death. We always say we want universal health care. And it can lay the foundation that doctors could be free enough to do the type of work that they need to do, and that we own the robots. Not only that, it would be enough people, young people being able to go to medical school and do what is needed to keep us healthy out here. So, you know, we go on and on and on, but this is being left in your hand. Right now, they're trying to privatize water all over the world. And remember, who gets the water owns the world. They got people here in Detroit alone that have been cut off. I done forgot what the number, we was talking about that earlier. Can't keep all that stuff in my head no more. But it's up in the thousands of people water that is off. And they will kill you over this water. They want to privatize it. They stole the water from Highland Park Lake one night. We didn't know what had happened. They had transferred the delivery of the water to Highland Park because Highland Park owns its own water. And the emergency manager said, the old fascist arm of the state, said, well, since we got Highland Park now we can move with Detroit and privatize both of them. If we sit back and let them privatize that water, you think Flint was something, the whole United States is going to be something else too. And it's a slow death that we are looking towards. It's in your hands, and the question is what you going to do? You going to keep letting them kill us step by step, or you going to stand up and take your rightful place in this fight? We have a Poor People's Campaign that is going on, and we want to make sure that young people are a part of this. This is the second round of the one that Dr. King had. And we got a big job to do. So I don't know what you want me to do now, but I'm glad to be here, and I'll talk to you next time. I want y'all to know this, and I forgot all about this. You know, it was 9 of us senior citizens back in 2014 when the Humrich company was going out to shut off people's water. 9 of us stood out there and stopped those trucks from running. And the week before, we had 10 people. They were arrested, and the judge let them go and dropped the charges. Well, when the 9 of us, senior citizens, got arrested, we were going back and forth to court until 2 months ago under different judges, because we found out that the city of Detroit was micromanaging the prostitution. Oh, I keep doing that, calling those prostitutes. They were micromanaging what they were doing. They were breaking every law it was, and it was an outright attack on our democratic rights. But we stood our ground, because we were using that as a way to educate people as to what is happening out here. They could take his house anytime. They can take my house anytime, because all they have to start is with rezoning on what they're going to have in a certain place. We don't take what they offer us, they're going to turn right around like they did and read search part and charge you for your own house that you have to pay the city. We don't want no kind of world like that. We want a world that you got freedom to relax, to get education. Don't be afraid to go get some health care. We got enough food in this country alone that can feed the world. We can build houses in 1 to 3 days. Good houses. I ain't talking about those little bitty dog houses they building out here. I'm talking about some real home and have recreation and everything around in our community. That's the kind of world we want to have. And it's up to you now as to which way we're going to go. Thank you.
Please give it up one more time to show appreciation for the panelists. This last part, we're going to take the last 15 minutes. We want to give people an opportunity to engage in some more intentional conversations, whether that's about the women's organizing, the cultural leadership that Mama Sharon George was talking about, whether that's the Detroit eviction defense, whether that's the Poor People's Campaign or some of the other organizing that Mama Miriam was talking about. So at this time, if you would like to talk with Sharon George, come up to the stage, to this area right here. If you would like to talk to Mama Marion Kramer right here. And if you'd like to talk to Jerry Colors on the right side, this far side right here. So we'll have about 15 minutes for those small groups. Sharon George, Marion Kramer, Jerry Colors on this side. Thank you.